Let's start with a small thought experiment. Imagine you have a glass bottle filled with water. Now place it gently on a table. The water settles evenly. Nothing surprising. But now tilt the bottle slightly to one side and leave it there for several hours. The water shifts. Pressure builds differently along the sides. Tiny bubbles move, currents form, and the system reorganizes itself, not dramatically, but subtly. Your body is not a bottle, of course. It's far more complex. But in a very rough way, when you lie down to sleep, something similar happens. You are a structure filled with fluids, blood, lymph, intracellular fluids, all responding to gravity, pressure, and time. During the day, when you stand or sit, your body has evolved ways to manage gravity in that orientation. Your heart pumps upward, your muscles stabilize you, your systems compensate. But when you lie down, especially on one side, the rules shift slightly. Gravity doesn't disappear, it simply acts differently. Now here's the interesting part. You spend not a few seconds in that position, but hours. 6, 7, 8 hours of stillness, or near stillness. That's a long time for a physical system to exist under slightly uneven conditions. So when you say I slept on the wrong side, what you might really be saying is this. For several hours, certain parts of my body experienced slightly more pressure, slightly less circulation, slightly different alignment than they are used to, and your body noticed. But it didn't complain immediately, it waited until morning. That's one of the curious things about the human body. It doesn't always signal problems in real time. Sometimes it accumulates small imbalances quietly, and only when you wake up, when you start moving again, do you feel the consequences. Now, here's where things get more subtle. The idea of a wrong side suggests there is a right side. But biology doesn't work like a simple instruction manual. There isn't one universal correct position for all people at all times. What feels wrong to you today might feel perfectly fine tomorrow. Your body changes based on fatigue, stress, posture during the day, even what you ate. So instead of thinking in terms of right and wrong, it may be more accurate to think in terms of balance and imbalance. When you lie on one side for a long time, you are introducing a small imbalance into a very complex system. And the real question is not did I choose the wrong side, but rather how did my body respond to that imbalance over time? That question turns out to be much harder to answer than it seems. Now let's take that idea a step further by imagining your body not just as a container of fluids, but as a living, active city. Picture a large city late at night. The streets are quieter than during the day, but they're not empty. There are still vehicles moving, maintenance trucks, emergency services, delivery systems. In your body, these vehicles are things like blood cells, oxygen, nutrients, and chemical signals. The roads they travel on are your blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic channels. And the buildings? Those are your organs and tissues, each with its own function, its own needs, its own schedule. Now here's the key idea. Sleep is not a shutdown, it's a shift in activity. The city doesn't stop. It reorganizes, repairs happen, waste is collected. Systems that were busy during the day change their priorities. Now imagine something unusual happens to this city. The entire landscape tilts slightly to one side. Not dramatically, just enough that gravity begins to favor certain areas over others. What happens? Water starts to collect more on one side of the streets. Traffic patterns subtly change. Some roads become slightly more congested, others a little less used. Certain neighborhoods receive more resources, while others receive just a bit less than usual. Nothing catastrophic happens. The city keeps functioning, but the balance is no longer perfectly even. That's what lying on one side of your body does. When you sleep on your side, gravity is no longer acting symmetrically across your body. One side becomes the downward side, experiencing more pressure. The other becomes the upper side, experiencing less compression. This difference affects how fluids distribute, how tissues press against each other, and how forces travel through your structure. Think about your shoulder pressing into the bed. Over time, that pressure doesn't just stay at the surface, it transmits inward into muscles, into connective tissue, even influencing nearby blood vessels. At the same time, the upper shoulder is relatively free, but it may be stretched or positioned in a way that requires muscles to hold it in place. So you have two different kinds of stress happening at once: compression on one side, tension on the other. Now extend this idea deeper into the body. Your organs are not rigidly fixed in place. They are supported, suspended, and slightly mobile. When you lie on one side, gravity gently shifts their position. Again, not dramatically, but enough to change how they press against each other and how fluids move through them. Even your lungs behave differently. The lung on the lower side tends to receive more blood flow due to gravity, while the upper lung may expand more easily because it's less compressed. The system adjusts, balances itself, and keeps you alive without you noticing. That's the remarkable part. Despite all these small imbalances, your body continues to function smoothly. It compensates, redistributes, adapts. But adaptation is not the same as perfection. If the city remains tilted for long enough, small inefficiencies begin to accumulate. A little extra pressure here, a little less flow there. Nothing dramatic, nothing immediately harmful, but enough that, by morning, you might feel the result: a slight stiffness, a subtle discomfort, a signal that, during the night, your internal city was working under conditions that were just a bit off balance. And yet, the deeper truth is this: there is no perfectly level city, no perfectly neutral position. Every way you lie down introduces some kind of tilt. The question is not how to eliminate it, but how your body negotiates it. Now let's move closer to the structure that quietly carries all of this, the spine. If you run your hand along your back, what you're feeling is not a single solid rod, but a column made of many small bones stacked one on top of another. These bones are called vertebrae, and between each one is a soft disc that acts like a cushion. You can think of it as a stack of blocks separated by tiny pillows. When everything is aligned, the weight of your body distributes evenly through this stack. No single point carries too much load, and the surrounding muscles don't have to work very hard to keep things stable. It's a bit like stacking books neatly one on top of another. Each book supports the next without bending or slipping. But now imagine you tilt that stack slightly. Not enough for it to fall over, just enough that the weight shifts more onto one edge than the other. The bottom books feel more pressure on one side, the top books lean, and the entire structure becomes subtly strained. It still stands, but it's no longer in a state of ease. That's what can happen when you sleep on one side with poor alignment. When your head is too high or too low on a pillow, your neck bends sideways. When your shoulder is compressed into the mattress, it pushes the upper spine out of its natural line. When your hips rotate slightly, the lower spine twists to compensate. Each of these changes is small, almost insignificant on its own, but together, over several hours, they create a pattern of uneven forces. Your muscles notice this immediately. Muscles are not just for movement, they are also stabilizers. When your spine shifts out of alignment even slightly, certain muscles tighten to hold things in place. Others stretch to accommodate the change. This creates an imbalance. Some muscles are working harder than they should, while others are being pulled longer than they prefer. Here's the interesting part. This process happens quietly while you sleep. You're not consciously aware of it. There's no immediate alarm signal. The body is simply doing what it always does, trying to maintain stability under changing conditions. But maintaining stability requires effort, and effort over time leads to fatigue. So when you wake up and feel that stiffness in your neck, or that tightness in your shoulder, what you're really feeling is the after effect of hours of microscopic adjustments. Tiny contractions, subtle tensions, small corrections, all adding up. Now consider another thought experiment. Imagine holding a light object in your hand. Not heavy, just slightly awkwardly shaped. For a few seconds, it's easy. For a minute, still manageable. But hold it in the same position for an hour, and suddenly your hand begins to ache. Not because the object is heavy, but because your muscles have been working continuously to stabilize it. Sleep can create a similar situation. Even though your body is at rest, certain parts are under continuous, low-level strain if alignment is off. The spine, being central to your structure, distributes that strain across the neck, shoulders, and back. But here's where things become less straightforward. Not everyone experiences this the same way. Some people can sleep in seemingly awkward positions and wake up feeling fine. Others are sensitive to even small deviations. Why? Part of the answer lies in individual differences: muscle strength, flexibility, previous injuries, daily posture. Part of it lies in something we still don't fully understand: how the nervous system interprets and responds to prolonged, low-level stress. So again, we arrive at a familiar boundary. We understand the mechanics, the shifting, the pressure, the muscle response, But the exact point at which these mechanical changes become discomfort or pain is not precisely defined. It's not a simple switch. It's a gradual transition, shaped by a system that is both incredibly precise and deeply complex. Now let's move deeper inside the body, beyond muscles and bones, into something less visible but equally important: your internal organs and how they behave when you lie on one side. Inside your chest, slightly tilted toward the left, sits your heart. Just below and around it are your lungs. Beneath that, your stomach, liver, and intestines occupy a carefully arranged but somewhat flexible space. These organs are not rigidly fixed like parts in a machine. They are supported, suspended, and able to shift slightly depending on posture and gravity. During the day, when you're upright, gravity pulls everything downward in a fairly predictable way. Your body has evolved to handle this orientation very efficiently. Blood circulation, breathing, digestion, all are tuned to this vertical arrangement. But when you lie down, especially on one side, the geometry changes. Imagine placing a soft bag filled with different objects onto a table. If the bag is upright, the objects settle in one way. Lay it on its side and they rearrange. Nothing breaks, nothing dramatic happens, but the internal configuration shifts. Pressure points change. Some objects press against each other more, others less. Your body behaves in a similar way. When you lie on your left side, for example, your stomach and intestines settle differently than when you lie on your right. This can influence how easily food moves through your digestive system. There is some evidence suggesting that left side sleeping may allow stomach contents to remain lower than the esophagus, potentially reducing acid reflux. On the right side, the orientation may slightly favor the opposite effect in some individuals. But here's where things become subtle. These are not absolute rules. They are tendencies, small statistical patterns observed across groups of people. For any single person, on any given night, the effect might be negligible or even reversed. Now consider the heart. It's not just a pump. It's a dynamic organ surrounded by lungs, vessels, and connective tissue. When you lie on one side, gravity influences how blood returns to the heart and how it distributes through the lungs. The lung that is closer to the bed tends to receive more blood flow simply because of gravity, while the upper lung may expand a bit more easily. This creates a kind of internal balancing act. The body constantly adjusts ventilation and blood flow to maintain efficient oxygen exchange. It's an elegant system, but not a perfectly uniform one. Small asymmetries are always present, and your position during sleep can slightly amplify or reduce them. Again, nothing extreme happens. You don't wake up because your lungs stopped working correctly. The system compensates. It always tries to compensate, but compensation has limits. If one side of the body experiences slightly more pressure for hours, tissues may compress just enough to alter circulation locally. Blood vessels might narrow slightly under pressure, fluid might accumulate differently, and nerves might experience subtle mechanical stress. Now, here's the interesting difficulty. Measuring these effects precisely is incredibly hard. We can observe general trends in controlled studies, but inside a sleeping human body, there are countless variables changing simultaneously. Breathing patterns, heart rate, micromovements, even dreams influencing physiology. Isolating the exact contribution of which side you slept on becomes a complex problem. It's like trying to understand how one street in a city affects the entire traffic system while every driver is changing routes in real time. So what do we actually know? We know that body position influences organ arrangement, fluid distribution, and pressure patterns. We know that certain positions may ease or worsen specific conditions, like acid reflux or mild breathing issues. But we do not have a complete unified explanation that applies cleanly to everyone, and that's an important point. The idea of a wrong side suggests a clear boundary. This is correct, that is incorrect. But biology rarely draws such sharp lines. Instead, it operates in gradients. Slight shifts, small advantages, minor disadvantages, all interacting in ways that are still not fully mapped. So when you wake up feeling slightly off after sleeping on one side, it may not be because something went wrong in a dramatic sense. It may simply be the result of a system that spent hours in a subtly different configuration, adjusting, compensating, and carrying on its quiet work in a tilted world. Now let's turn to something even less visible, and in many ways more mysterious: the movement of fluids inside your body. especially blood and the lymphatic system. You already know that blood circulates continuously. The heart pumps, vessels carry, tissues receive. It's often described as a closed-loop system, like water moving through pipes. But that description is a bit too neat. In reality, blood flow is dynamic, responsive, and influenced by many forces, including gravity. Here's a simple thought experiment. Imagine a network of flexible tubes filled with liquid, spread throughout a soft structure. Now place that structure flat on a surface, but slightly tilted to one side. The liquid doesn't stop flowing, but its distribution changes. Some pathways experience slightly more pressure, others slightly less. Flow continues, but not in exactly the same pattern. That's what happens when you lie on one side for hours. Gravity doesn't stop acting on your blood. It gently influences where that blood tends to accumulate and how easily it returns to the heart. The vessels on the lower side of your body may experience slightly higher pressure simply because they are downhill. The vessels on the upper side may experience slightly less. Your body is designed to handle this. Blood vessels can expand or contract. The heart adjusts its rhythm. Tiny valves and reflexes maintain circulation. But again, adaptation does not mean uniformity. It means constant adjustment. Now let's add another layer, the lymphatic system. Unlike the circulatory system, the lymphatic system doesn't have a central pump like the heart. Instead, it relies on movement, muscle contractions, breathing, and subtle pressure changes to push fluid through its network. This fluid, called lymph, carries waste products, excess proteins, and other materials that need to be cleared from tissues. So here's the question. What happens to this system when you lie still on one side for several hours? If movement is one of the main drivers of lymph flow, then reduced movement and uneven pressure could influence how efficiently this system works. The side of your body pressed against the bed might experience slightly different drainage conditions than the side facing upward. Some researchers have suggested that body position during sleep might even influence how efficiently the brain clears metabolic waste. The brain has its own fluid exchange system, sometimes described as a kind of cleaning cycle, that becomes more active during sleep. There are hints, just hints, that sleeping position could affect this process, but this is where we have to be very careful. The evidence is still limited. The human body is extremely difficult to study in such detail during natural sleep. Most of what we know comes from small studies, animal models, or indirect measurements. So while the idea is intriguing, that your sleeping position could influence how your brain cleans itself, we cannot say exactly how significant this effect is, or how it varies from person to person. Still, it reveals something important. Even in a state of rest, your body is not static. Fluids are moving, exchanging, redistributing, and the direction and efficiency of that movement are influenced by physical forces, gravity, pressure, and time. Now think about what happens when these forces are slightly uneven for several hours. Not dramatically uneven, just subtly biased toward one side. It's like a landscape after a gentle rain. Water doesn't flood everything, but it tends to collect in certain areas more than others. Over time, those small differences can shape patterns, where the soil stays moist, where it dries out more quickly. In your body, these patterns may not be visible, but they exist. Slight differences in fluid distribution, tiny variations in pressure, minute changes in flow, and once again your body compensates. It adjusts, balances, corrects. But compensation is not perfect symmetry. It's an ongoing process of negotiation. So when you wake up and feel a little different, slightly heavy, slightly stiff, slightly off, it may not be due to a single cause. It may be the result of countless small fluid shifts that occurred quietly throughout the night, guided by something as simple and as unavoidable as gravity. Now we arrive at a question that seems simple on the surface but becomes surprisingly difficult the moment you look closely. What does it actually mean for one side to be wrong? The phrase suggests a clear distinction, as if your body has a preferred orientation built into it like a machine with a correct setting. But when you examine biology carefully, you begin to notice that it rarely works in such absolute terms. Let's consider a familiar situation. Imagine adjusting the temperature in a room. There is no single, correct temperature that works for everyone at all times. What feels comfortable depends on your clothing, your activity, even your mood. The system is flexible, and the idea of wrong only appears when you move too far from a range that your body can easily adapt to. Sleep position is similar. Your body does not have a single perfect side. Instead, it has a range of positions it can tolerate, adapt to, and even function well in. Within that range, small changes, left side, right side, slight variations in angle, are usually handled without any noticeable problem. The body adjusts continuously, making tiny corrections in muscle tension, circulation, and breathing. But outside that comfortable range, or even near its edges, things become less efficient. Now here's where it gets interesting. The edges of that range are not fixed. They shift depending on many factors: how tired your muscles are, whether you've been sitting all day, if you have a minor strain, how firm your mattress is, even how deeply you sleep. So the same position that feels perfectly fine one night might feel uncomfortable the next. This makes the concept of a wrong side less like a fixed rule and more like a moving boundary, one that depends on context rather than a universal law. Let's try a thought experiment. Imagine balancing a pencil on your finger. There isn't just one exact point where the pencil can stay balanced. There's a small region where it works, and outside that region, it falls. But that region is sensitive. A slight movement of your hand, a tiny shift in the air, and the balance changes. Your body behaves in a similar way during sleep. There is a zone of balance where your spine, muscles, and internal systems are under manageable conditions. But small shifts, an extra bend in your neck, a slight twist in your hips, uneven pressure on your shoulder, can push parts of your body closer to the limits of that zone. And when you stay there for hours, the effects begin to accumulate. Now consider another layer of complexity. Different systems in your body may have different preferred conditions. Your digestive system might benefit slightly from one position, your spine from another, your breathing from yet another. There is no guarantee that a single position optimizes everything at once. So the body does something remarkable. It compromises. It finds a configuration that is good enough across multiple systems, even if it's not perfect for any one of them. And throughout the night, as you shift and turn, it keeps searching for new positions that redistribute pressure and reset those small imbalances. This is why movement during sleep is so important. You are not meant to remain perfectly still. Those small turns and adjustments are part of how your body maintains equilibrium over long periods. But sometimes, for various reasons, you stay in one position longer than usual. Maybe you're deeply tired. Maybe the position feels initially comfortable. Maybe you simply don't move as much that night. In those cases, the small imbalances are not reset as frequently, and by morning they become noticeable. So the wrong side is not a strict rule written into your biology. It is a situation where, for a period of time, your body remained in a configuration that pushed certain systems slightly beyond their most comfortable range. It's not failure. It's not damage in the dramatic sense. It's the natural result of a complex system operating under constraints, constantly adapting, but not always perfectly. And that subtle imperfection is what you feel when you wake up. Now let's look at something even more subtle: the signals your body sends you and how those signals are interpreted. Because the discomfort you feel in the morning is not just about pressure or alignment, it's also about perception. You might assume that if something goes wrong in the body, you feel it immediately. But that's not usually how it works. The body is constantly filtering information. At any given moment, millions of signals are traveling through your nervous system: pressure, temperature, stretch, chemical changes, and most of them never reach your conscious awareness. If they did, it would be overwhelming. So the brain selects. It prioritizes certain signals and ignores others. It decides what is important enough to bring into your awareness: pain, stiffness, discomfort. These are not direct measurements of damage. They are interpretations. They are the brain's best guess about what might need attention. Now think about what happens during sleep. While you're asleep, your conscious awareness is reduced. The filtering system changes. Some signals are suppressed so that you don't wake up every time you shift slightly or experience minor pressure. If that didn't happen, sleep would be constantly interrupted. So during the night, your body may be experiencing small imbalances: compression in one shoulder, tension in the neck, subtle changes in circulation, but those signals are not fully broadcast to your awareness. They are noted but not emphasized. Then morning comes. You wake up, begin to move, and suddenly those quiet signals become louder. The muscles that have been holding a position for hours start to change length. Joints that were still begin to move again. Blood flow patterns shift back toward your upright posture. And this transition is important. It's often not the position itself that creates the sensation of discomfort, but the change from that position. A muscle that has been slightly contracted for hours may resist when you try to stretch it. A compressed area may feel tender when pressure is removed. A joint that was held at a small angle may feel stiff when it tries to return to neutral. So what you experience in the morning is not a snapshot of what happened during the night. It's more like an echo, a delayed response that becomes noticeable only when conditions change. Now here's where things become even more interesting. Two people can sleep in very similar positions and wake up with completely different experiences. One feels fine, the other feels sore. Why? Part of the answer lies in the sensitivity of the nervous system. Some individuals have a system that amplifies certain signals more than others. This doesn't mean something is wrong, it simply means their brain is more responsive to particular kinds of input, like pressure or tension. Another part of the answer lies in context. If your muscles were already fatigued from the day before, if you were slightly stressed, if your posture during the day created small imbalances, then the same sleeping position might produce a stronger signal in the morning. So, the discomfort is not just about what happened during sleep. It's about the interaction between your sleeping position and the state your body was already in. Now consider a simple analogy. Imagine a quiet room with a faint background noise, so faint you barely notice it. Now turn off all other sounds, and suddenly that faint noise becomes obvious. It didn't get louder. Your environment just changed in a way that made it more noticeable. Your body works in a similar way. During sleep, certain signals are kept in the background. When you wake up and begin moving, the volume of those signals effectively increases, not because the underlying issue suddenly appeared, but because your system is now paying attention to it. This makes the idea of a wrong side even more complicated. It's not just about physical position. It's about how that position interacts with your nervous system's interpretation of events. In other words, what you feel is not simply what happened, it is what your body decided was worth telling you about. Now let's step back and look at the body not as separate parts, bones, muscles, organs, but as a single interconnected system full of feedback loops. A feedback loop is a simple idea. Something changes in the system, and that change triggers a response, which then influences the original condition. A thermostat is a familiar example. If the temperature drops, the heater turns on. When the temperature rises, the heater turns off. The system constantly adjusts itself to stay within a certain range. Your body is filled with systems like this, except they are far more complex and layered. When you lie on one side, pressure increases in certain tissues. That pressure can slightly reduce blood flow in that area. In response, your body may adjust heart rate, vessel diameter, or even trigger tiny movements to redistribute weight. Muscles may activate subtly to relieve stress. Nerves send signals, some of which lead to automatic corrections, others of which are stored for later interpretation. All of this happens continuously, without your awareness. Now imagine multiple feedback loops operating at once. Circulation, muscle tone, breathing, nerve signaling, fluid balance, all interacting with each other. A small change in one loop influences another, which influences another, and so on. This creates a system that is stable, but not static. Stability here doesn't mean everything stays perfectly the same. It means the system stays within workable limits, while constantly adjusting. It's more like balancing on a bicycle than sitting in a parked car. Small corrections are happening all the time to prevent larger deviations. When you sleep on one side, you are introducing a small continuous disturbance into this balancing act. The system responds. It shifts weight slightly. It adjusts breathing patterns. It redistributes fluids. It may even trigger you to roll over, without waking you fully. These adjustments are part of the body's way of keeping things within acceptable boundaries. But here's the key point. These feedback loops are not perfect. They have delays. They have limits. And sometimes, multiple loops interact in ways that are not completely predictable. A correction in one system might slightly overshoot or undershoot. Another system might compensate in a different direction. Over short periods, these tiny imperfections don't matter. The system absorbs them easily. but over several hours, they can accumulate into something noticeable. Think of it like steering a car on a long road. If your steering corrections are perfectly timed and precise, you stay in the center of the lane effortlessly. But if each correction is just slightly off, too early, too late, too strong, too weak, you still stay on the road, but the ride becomes less smooth. Small deviations add up. Your body during sleep is doing something similar. It's constantly making micro adjustments to maintain balance under the influence of gravity and pressure. Most of the time, this works so well that you wake up feeling normal. But occasionally, the adjustments are just a little less efficient, or the conditions are slightly more demanding. And that's when you notice the result. Now, here's another layer of complexity. These feedback loops don't just respond to physical forces. They also respond to internal states, fatigue, stress, hydration, even temperature. So the same sleeping position can lead to different outcomes depending on what else is happening in your body. This is why it's so difficult to create a simple rule like, this side is correct and that side is wrong. The outcome depends on how dozens of systems interact over time, each one adjusting, compensating, and sometimes interfering with the others. What you experience in the morning is not the result of a single cause. It's the final expression of a network of processes that have been running all night, quietly, automatically, and with remarkable complexity. And the more closely you look at it, the more it becomes clear that even something as ordinary as lying on one side is part of a deeply dynamic system. One that is always in motion, even when you appear completely still. Now let's bring all of this back to something practical. The actual experiences you notice when you wake up in the morning. You open your eyes, shift slightly, and something feels off. Maybe your neck doesn't turn as smoothly as usual. Your shoulder feels heavy, almost as if it belongs to someone else. Your lower back might feel tight, or there's a faint headache sitting quietly in the background. These sensations are familiar to almost everyone, yet they are often misunderstood. It's tempting to point to a single cause, I slept on the wrong side. But what you're feeling is not the result of one simple mistake. It's the outcome of many small processes that unfolded over hours. Let's take the neck as an example. During the night, if your head is tilted slightly, maybe your pillow is too high or too low, the muscles on one side of your neck may remain shortened, while the muscles on the other side are stretched. Neither condition is extreme, but both are sustained for a long time. Muscles are designed to contract and relax, to move and adjust. When they are held in one position without variation, even gently, they begin to behave differently. The shortened muscles may become slightly tense, the stretched ones may become less responsive. When you wake up and try to move, that imbalance reveals itself as stiffness. Now consider the shoulder. If you're lying on your side, one shoulder is pressed into the mattress for hours. The weight of your upper body creates continuous pressure. Blood flow in that area may be slightly reduced, not enough to cause damage, but enough to change how the tissue feels. Nerves in that region may also be compressed, just enough to alter sensation. That's why sometimes your arm feels numb or asleep. It's not that the system failed, it's that the local conditions changed temporarily. When you move, circulation returns to its usual pattern, and sensation gradually normalizes. But in that transition period, the difference is noticeable. Now think about your lower back. Even a small twist in your hips, perhaps one leg slightly forward, the other slightly back, can create a gentle rotation in the spine. Held for hours, this rotation may cause certain muscles to remain engaged, while others are relaxed. By morning, that uneven engagement can feel like tightness or resistance when you try to stand or stretch. Again, nothing dramatic has happened. There is no single moment where something went wrong. Instead, there is a gradual accumulation of small asymmetries. Headaches can also emerge from this process. If neck muscles are under mild, prolonged tension, they can influence blood flow and nerve signals in the surrounding area. The result may be a dull, diffuse discomfort rather than sharp pain. It's not always obvious that the origin is mechanical, because the sensation is felt more broadly. What's important to notice is that these effects are usually temporary. As you begin to move, stretch, and return to your normal daily posture, the system readjusts. Blood flow redistributes, muscles change length, joints regain their usual range. The discomfort fades, not because it was insignificant, but because the body is highly capable of restoring balance. But repetition matters. If similar patterns occur night after night, same position, Same alignment issues. The small stresses may not fully reset. Over time, they can influence posture, muscle habits, and even how your body responds to certain movements during the day. Still, even here, the process is gradual. There is no sharp boundary between fine and not fine. There is only a spectrum of adaptation. And this is what makes the experience both ordinary and complex at the same time. Waking up with stiffness or discomfort is not a sign of failure, it's a signal, a quiet report from a system that has been operating under slightly uneven conditions. It's your body's way of saying, something was different last night. Not necessarily wrong, just different enough to notice.